Good evening and welcome back to the public portion of the Wednesday, February 7th, 2024 meeting, and we're reconvening at 7:04 p.m. We have no public hearing tonight, and I believe, Jonathan, we have no public comments? Anything called in, phoned in, written in, faxed in? Stomped in? Jonathan?
Thank you, Your Worship. We do not have any registered public comments. Does council want to make the motion following the in-camera discussion?
Oh, the one that we just did? Sure. The Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. Because of a fulsome discussion that we had in terms of council information, I would like to move, Your Worship, to approve a capital budget request in the amount of $45,000 that be funded from the Fiscal Stabilization Reserve for environmental monitoring.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion?
I would just like to say, Your Worship, that this is something that the town conducts or has conducted on a regular basis to ensure that we do due diligence throughout the community, and this is relevant to that.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion or comments? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion is carried. We have no delegations tonight, which brings us to the consent agenda, item 7. Are there any
Sorry, Mayor.
items?
There's
Sorry.
probably a motion to defer.
I got it.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Wiley.
I would also, before continuing with the public portion, just, there's another motion. It's at the bottom of page 2 here. The council defer the discussion on items 3.3 HR annual report, 3.4 ICC meeting discussion advice from officials, 3.5 council CAO dialogue advice from officials, and 3.6 CAO evaluation confidential evaluations to after correspondence on the regular council meeting agenda, thereby creating a second closed meeting section with a new discussion starting at 13.1.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion is carried. Item 7, consent agenda. Are there any items from the consent agenda that councillors may wish to remove? Councillor Wagoner.
I would like to remove 12.1, Epilepsy Association of Calgary.
Thank you. Then we'll, Jonathan, do we vote on those? No. Just have to move the consent agenda as amended. Okay, so is someone prepared to make a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended? Councillor Wiley, thank you.
Sure. The council adopt the recommendations of the following agenda reports by an omnibus motion. 8.3 regular council meeting minutes for January 17th, 2024. 9.1 2024 and 2025 United Way Funding Memorandum of Understanding. 11.2.1 Wheatland Housing Management Body meeting minutes for October 19th, 2023. 11.2.2 WHMB meeting minutes October 24th. 11.2.3 WHMB meeting minutes for November 16th. 11.2.4 Strathmore Library Board meeting minutes November 21st, 2023.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion is carried. We move now to 9.2, animal trapping, neuter, and spay policy, number 2603. Mark, good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Worship and Council. I have a quick PowerPoint presentation to walk us through some of these proposed changes to our animal trapping, neuter, and spay policy, policy number 2603. Let's see how this goes. All right, perfect. So we have an existing policy that was drafted in 2019. The revisions that have been circulated to council, as well as the summary page that really includes this PowerPoint, just really speak to some of the necessary changes to the policy that reflects the current practices and terminology. I'll quickly walk through council through some of the changes, and if there's any questions at the end, I'll do my best to try to answer them. So just the first one is a revised policy statement. So as council has seen this document before, it just has a new policy statement and replaces the old one. And really the rationale for this change is to provide some updated clarity on the policy. Really that we just trap really two animals or two types of animals, skunks, non-domestic, obviously, and cats. Obviously the next one is we move into definitions. So we have a change to the council definition, domestic animals, non-domestic animals, peace officer, where it previously said enforcement officer. We just have a new updated definition. And then we have finish this section with a definition of trap, neuter, and release. Then we go quickly into the responsibilities. I know you can't see it on the page here, but it just speaks about peace officer being replaced, or enforcement officer being replaced with peace officer. The biggest changes to the policy here, and I apologize for the small font, is you can see here we just provided some grammatical changes for section 3.2 of the new policy. In terms of section 3.3, this is a new section and provides specific dates to ensure that animals are trapped during a specific time, that traps are lent out, to ensure that if there's bad weather like we are facing now, that an animal isn't left in a trap, and obviously the rest is history. 3.4 speaks about removing some outdated information about the old town hall and things like that. 3.5 gets replaced, and it just reflects the current practice and addition of 3.5C, which speaks to that town administration will not be required to handle the animal. It just specifically says that the peace officers will, in case somebody just leaves an animal in a trap at the front desk here. 3.6 speaks about, reflects the current practice, and 3.7 is some new information regarding skunk traps that wasn't existing in the old policy. The last two sections relate to the disposal of an animal. So we've reordered these two sections here and replaced and updated information from enforcement to the peace officer. And obviously to reflect the current bylaws, which is our responsible animal control. So that's the crux of my presentation. If there's any questions of council, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Mitzner.
I just heard from a resident a couple days ago that we now have raccoons in Strathmore. So I'm wondering if we should add that to our policy?
Through the chair, the trapping of raccoons will require some additional resources being purchased. We don't have the necessary traps and things like that. Raccoons would fall under fish and wildlife, and so that would be the contact there. However, if council wishes to change this is a service level change, and therefore.
No, I think let Fish and Wildlife handle it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mitzner. Deputy Mayor Langmaid, and then Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize for the delay here. I'm just switching between screens. I have just a couple of questions and then a potential amendment. The first question I have is the policy defines trap, neuter, or like the trap, neuter, spay, and return policy, the TNR policy. But it actually doesn't refer to it anywhere else in the policy as to how those animals are spayed, neutered, and released. Who's responsible for doing that? Does the town pay for cats to be spayed and neutered and released? I found the policy kind of silent on that.
Through the chair, our arrangement with Happy Cat, it looks after this. The town contributes an annual basis to the Happy Cat Society to assist with the neutering and releasing of cats.
I understand that, but in the policy, when it says for the disposal of animals, after the appropriate waiting period as specified in the responsible animal control bylaw, a peace officer will deliver the animal to a contracted service provider or one of the local veterinary offices in Strathmore for adoption, or euthanasia. It doesn't actually refer or permit trap, neuter, and release.
So through the chair, through the
Was that intentional or an oversight, or I want to make sure that I understand here.
So the section related to section 4, disposable animals, I apologize, through the chair, speaks to the event that if a feral cat is trapped and has significant injuries or anything like that, the town would then look after some of those costs associated with, I guess it's a non-feral cat, I should say, to get the cat up ready for adoption if possible. But there are instances where an animal is literally beyond saving. And at that point, the policy then would give us the latitude to make the responsible choice here and work with one of the service providers. So hopefully that addresses your question.
It doesn't quite, because we're still not actually addressing trap, neuter, spay, and release. The policy doesn't afford for release at any point. There's no mechanism for release mentioned in here. It's adoption or euthanasia, which I understand both have we need both of those options. But for a feral cat, if we're doing a trap, neuter, spay, and return policy, then there should be something to do with return and how that's handled and who pays for the trap, neuter, and spay. No?
Through the chair, in the event that we have a feral cat, the administration would deliver that cat to a local provider, ensure that it's spayed, and then release it back into where it was trapped. That's when it relates to the trapping and the release part of the policy.
Okay. So then my question is, should 4.2 be amended to say a contracted service provider or one of the local veterinary offices in Strathmore for adoption, euthanasia, or return to outdoors, or something of the sort?
Yeah, we have no issue if you'd like to make that change.
Okay. I have just a couple more questions on this one. Sorry, I'm flipping between documents here. Section 3.3, the one that you mentioned, is new. I like that. We don't need to be giving out traps in the middle of winter when someone might get very, very cold in them. I was just one amendment that I might be proposing as well, and just that I wanted to hear some feedback on first, says trapping may be restricted at an earlier date depending on weather conditions. So if it's too cold on May 10th, we might restrict it a little earlier than that, or if it snows early. But what I'm wondering is, could we amend that to say may be restricted or extended? Remove the earlier date reference, and then just say depending on weather conditions, just because sometimes we have more beautiful weather than we intend, and the season can go on a little longer. And with that, sometimes if you have a very warm spring, you have a very early kitten season that might kick off before May 10th, when people may need those traps a little sooner if we have warmer weather. Would there be any operational concern, anything like that? I would still want municipal enforcement. I'm not saying municipal enforcement wouldn't have the ability to make that decision. I just want to be able to give them latitude both ways. Would there be any concerns with that proposed amendment from administration?
None from us.
All right. One other question is, the agreement that was appended to the previous bylaw, will that just be updated with the new information with no major changes?
That is correct. Obviously, those documents probably should never have included into a policy specifically, because every time they needed to be changed, it would have to go to council. So these would be just internal documents that administration uses to ensure that the traps are properly accounted for, et cetera.
Excellent, thank you. And then just the final question. Final question I have is a bit of a funny one, and I hope it's not a concern. But I'm wondering if we've had any reported instances of roaming chickens And could a roaming chicken be caught in a skunk trap? And if so, where would chickens fall? Because I can't decide in the policy if they're a domestic animal that requires on humans to live, or if they're livestock, which therefore makes them not a domestic animal.
Through the chair, to my knowledge, we have not had any roving chickens.
They would be released to KFC.
If I catch them there for dinner, maybe. No, that's wonderful. I just wanted to ask and to understand if the chickens are getting out. So thank you very much, and to council, I would, given the chance, when we're ready to make some motions, be willing to maybe look at those two items that I had discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley?
I'm just curious, how many feral cats a year would be likely trapped and then released back? Even a
Through the chair.
ballpark?
Through the chair, I don't have the specific stats on
That's all right, don't
feral
worry.
versus non-feral.
In total then?
Director, that information,
Comes through Happy
it
Cat.
came through Happy Cat, and they did give it to us last year.
Yeah.
And we could probably get it, yeah. They're pretty specific, and she actually is very good about responding to any questions from
Thank you.
community.
So from a procedure point of view, Deputy Mayor Langmaid, will you be doing the motion and then presenting your amendments?
Yeah, yes, Your Worship. So I'd be making the motion with the amendment.
Okay.
Just to be very clear, with the two amendments, to be very clear to council, one of them is in section 3.3, and that's to change the wording to reduce or extend, and to remove, sorry, I'm looking through, to say trapping may be restricted or extended depending on weather conditions. This is the change I'm looking for in
Okay.
I'd be proposing in 3.3. And then in section 4.2, the amendment I'd be proposing is at the end of the line, it would say adoption, comma, euthanasia, comma, or trap, neuter, spay, and release.
Okay, why don't you present your motion and then we can hear them in entirety with the motion. Does that make sense?
All right, let's
All
give
right.
it a shot here. So the motion is that council approve the animal trapping, neuter, and spay policy number 2603 with the following amendments. To amend section 3.3 to say the town will provide traps for the period of May 10th through October 10th. At the sole discretion of municipal enforcement, trapping may be extended or restricted depending on weather conditions. And amended in section 4.2 to state after waiting the appropriate waiting period as specified in the responsible animal control bylaw number 18-18 section 10, a peace officer will deliver the animal to a contracted service provider or one of the local veterinary offices in Strathmore for adoption, euthanasia, or trap, neuter / spay and release.
Thank you. So now that we have this motion on the floor concerning amendments.
Sorry, and that council rescind animal trapping, neuter, and spay policy number 2601.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion with its amendments? Councillor Wiley?
I just appreciate Deputy Mayor Langmaid's work in finding those two very reasonable small amendments. I think it improves the bylaw, and I appreciate administration's work in keeping our bylaws, policies updated.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. If there are no further comments, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion is carried. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Worship and Council.
And thank you, Deputy Mayor. So that brings us to 9.3, the letter concerning our MLA. Jonathan, did you want to do a preamble or speak to this? Or interpretive dance, perhaps?
Thank you, Worship and Council. So before you today is a draft letter to our MLA Chantal DeYoung. The purpose of the letter is to request a meeting between her and council, just to discuss shared priorities and our council strategic priorities for the remainder of their term. I'd be happy to take any questions regarding the letter from council.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions? Then at this time, I'm looking hopefully for a motion. Councillor Wegener.
I move that council authorize the mayor to sign a letter to Parliamentary Secretary DeYoung regarding an invitation to meet with Mayor Fuel and council.
Thank you. And now that we have a motion on the floor, is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion is carried. We have no bylaws tonight. Councillor information and inquiries, questions between councillors and council statements. Any questions for your fellow councillors?
I have a question for Mark that will probably fall under yours, and it is related to the to two incidences of deer being hit on the periphery of the community and not being killed outright, and then you know, there was lots of talk about, and I don't know about the veracity or verisimilitude that happened in terms of the conversations that came about on Facebook, but do you have to get involved in that? Because I saw our peace officers were perhaps involved. I have no idea, but I just wonder, you know, if you know, it's something that I'd never seen come across our desks before in terms of having to deal with, and how very difficult that might be if they weren't able to contact. People were talking about how extraordinarily difficult it was to contact Fish and Wildlife, and of course their services have been severely reduced, and wondering if that ever has any impact on your work.
Through the chair, Councillor Peterson, obviously we have a very good relationship with Fish and Wildlife, and you're right. Obviously, their resources are limited, but in the event animal being like a wild animal being killed, like obviously, you know, municipal enforcement either from themselves or the county do their best to try to cordon off the area and do what they can to help the animal until Fish and Wildlife attend. Obviously, it's a challenge. Like I said, they don't have the resources that Fish and Wildlife do. So it's like I said, they try to do their best.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. So that brings us further into 11.3 question and answer period, if there are any other questions. Councillor Mitzner.
I have a question for Jamie. Are we able to set up a meeting when there's time available at council for Southland Transport to do a presentation to the town of Strathmore?
Your question was, can Southland Transportation do a presentation to council? Then they should, you know, reach out to Jonathan and complete the delegation process, and then, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Mitzner and Kevin, for your answer. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Langmaid?
Your worship. First of all, I'd like to open with Kevin. I'd like to thank you and your team for, this is a bit delayed, but how beautiful the Christmas decorations looked in Kinsman Park this year. It was sparkly and gorgeous and brought the seasonal flavor, and I love it. And it was really special for me to be the to be able to do the countdown for the lighting of our brand new giant Christmas tree at Town Hall as well. Recently, I have gotten a couple of comments and questions from the community regarding the Christmas lights in Kinsman Park, mainly around when they might be shut off for the year. Residents have kind of mentioned a few similar reasons. One, they've kind of mentioned that it's probably time. The season has passed, and also some concerns around the efficient use of energy. And I know I got some comments back when I shared a few weeks ago when we had a power emergency alert asking people to turn off their space heaters. They went, well, what about Christmas lights? So I've committed to bringing the question back of when might we expect the Christmas lights to be packed away in Kinsman Park? I'm ready to start thinking about long sunny days in my garden.
Kevin.
Through the chair, so the lights have been in the process of being taken down this week. I guess there's a few factors to answer the question or the categories I think you used. So one of them, first and foremost, is most of the lights are plugged in at the top of the light, and we do not have a bucket or a lift. We are in the process of purchasing one, but we were having some troubles getting the rental to actually do that this year in a timely manner. So going forward, we'll have our own equipment to be able to do that. That's one factor. The second factor, I guess, is allocation of resources. With the snow and the cold that we had, the first priority was on the snow and ice control, things like that. During the cold snap, we actually had the ECC mobilized doing planning and logistics to support other communities, but also to support our community. So during that period, our operations people were also busy safing town infrastructure and buildings. So they were making sure that the fire department could operate if there was a power outage, because first and foremost, we needed our emergency services. Then they were in buildings such as this and up at the pool and the arenas. We were busy turning off everything that we could in this building, but also safing the building, shutting down the water so that if we did have brownouts or blackouts rotating, that we did not freeze our pipes and incur significant financial damage to the town. So those kind of things were going on. You know, we are doing an after action report and learning for this, because this was new for Alberta in general, and so we want a more comprehensive plan if this is, I guess, going to be a more regular occurrence. But what I can say is that turning off Christmas lights in those blackout periods will be very low. They're LED, they're not a big power consumer. More importantly are things like up at the pool, the door freezes open there, and so we got to get that closed, because that's significant energy loss through there, of course, when that's open at -30 or -40. So, you know, I think next year you'll see it done in a more timely manner, but in emergency situations, it will be very low on our priority list to turn those lights off. There's much more significant financial liabilities to the town that we need to address first.
Thank you very much for that very fulsome answer. I know that the cold snap had everyone working really hard on things that were hopefully not freezing solid. So thank you very much. And to be clear, I don't believe this was you know, the questions that came to me were not necessarily a criticism, but I'm very appreciative of your answer, and I will share that information with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I did see yesterday that the lift was at the Kinsman Amphitheater. So they began to take down the decorations that are high up and above the amphitheater. So that may help with some of your public questions as well. Any other questions tonight? Councillor Peterson.
It's not a question, Your
Then you
Worship.
can't do it.
I just stop it. I just wanted to say that the Wheatland Society of the Arts wanted me to send a video to administration and council. It is in thanks of the work that has been done by the town to support arts in the community, and they're extremely grateful. And so the number of people that have engaged, I think, has more than doubled again. Councillor Wiley mentioned it in his comments at the time when they were here, and I think they have doubled that number yet again, and they just wanted me to pass that along.
Thank you for that. We move now to 11.4, no administrative inquiries, Jonathan. And then we move on to 11.5, notices of motion. And just before we do this with Councillor Wiley, I just want to remind everybody there is no discussion or debate on a notice of motion. There can be questions for clarification purposes. So, Councillor Wiley.
Sure, it's a long one, so get on your slippers, put on a house coat, maybe run yourself a hot bath, because here we go. Whereas the town of Strathmore is the owner of the cemetery situated at Plan 9612032 Block C, and whereas council deems it necessary and expedient to have certain regulations pertaining to the management and administration of the cemetery, and whereas the council previously considered Cemetery Bylaw 2331 at the November 1st, 2023 regular council meeting, and whereas the Cemetery Bylaw 2331 request for decision, RFD, included proposed amendments to the bylaw in Attachment 2. And whereas council has deferred further discussion of the cemetery bylaw to the May 8th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Notice is hereby given that the following motion will be brought forward for consideration at the February 21st, 2024 regular council meeting. That council direct administration to prepare a bylaw with the following amendments to bylaw 2331 as presented in attachment 2 of the November 1st, 2023 cemetery bylaw 2331 request for decision as amended. That Section 8.3A be amended to state, monuments sitting on a full-size burial plot are recommended not to exceed maximum height of 3 feet, including base, maximum depth of 1 foot, including base, and a maximum width of 2.5 feet, not including base. The cemetery coordinator, at their discussion, can prevent monuments considered to be too large for safety reasons, deemed to impede other plots, or prevent landscaping and maintenance. Where there is a ribbon or base present, all monuments will be placed upon the base or the ribbon. That Section 8.4A be amended to state, flat grave markers must be flush with the ground and not impede other plots or landscaping and maintenance. That Section 13.1 be amended to state, the public may visit the cemetery at any time that Strathmore's regular parks are open. That Section 13.8 be deleted in its entirety. That Section 13.9 be deleted in its entirety. That the following be added to Section 13 of the bylaw. Grave decorations such as, but not limited to, statues, crosses, plaques, benches, and vases must be made of granite, marble, metal craft, or another equally durable material. Items made of glass, ceramic, china, or other easily breakable material will be removed immediately and placed in storage. The town will make reasonable efforts to provide written notice to the authorized representative of any disrepair of the grave decorations. The authorized representative will be provided 30 days to contact the town with a repair or replacement plan. If no contact is made, the town will hold it for an additional 90 days. If no contact is made at the expiry of 90 days of the removal, the town will dispose of the grave decoration. That Section 13.12 be amended to state seasonal decorations shall be allowed to be placed 1 week prior to a holiday, but cannot impede maintenance or be a safety hazard. Seasonal decorations that are still in place 1 week from the conclusion of the holiday will be removed and disposed of without notice. That Section 13.13 be deleted in its entirety. That Section 13.14 be amended to remove the word benches. That Section 13.20 will be deleted in its entirety. That Section 13.22 be amended to state, no person shall cultivate any plot without the consent of the cemetery coordinator. That Section 13.26 be amended to state, any memorial tribute or grave decoration considered offensive will be brought to council for a possibility of removal. That Section A, penalties, Section 13, be amended to remove the word benches from the item on erecting or constructing, and the word care from the item on cultivating. We're almost done. And that council direct administration to develop a permitting process for residents who want to apply for decorations under the condition that they maintain the plot and bring the proposed permit process and revised cemetery bylaw to the April 10th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting for council's consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Could I ask one question of you, sir? The question is, I believe you told us that the purple print are your amendments?
No, from my understanding, the
Okay.
purple print in attachment 2 is the administration's
All right,
recommendations.
that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you, Worship and Council. So in attachment 2 of that RFD that was attached to the notice of motion, those were amendments that were presented by administration at the November 1st meeting. So as per Councillor Wiley's motion here. Should council adopt this motion in a subsequent meeting, you'd be also accepting those amendments in attachment 2 to be the new version of the bylaw.
Okay, and this is coming to us in May? Is that when we deferred it? Notice,
The notice of motion will come on February 21st, and then in the notice of motion states that the bylaw would come to the April 10th committee of the
Okay,
whole
sorry.
meeting. Yeah.
got you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Peterson.
Does that provide time enough? Because I know initially, I think we said May.
So I think with the notice of motion, when it comes back in 2 weeks, council will debate each of the items that Councillor Wiley's brought forward. So we'll define for administration the scope of work we're undertaking to bring back in May.
Thank you, everyone. We move now to correspondence. 12.1, the Epilepsy Association of Calgary Epilepsy Awareness Day. This was the item that was removed from the consent agenda. So this is one that would need a motion to be able to declare it that day. And I refer you to your skeleton minutes for a motion to hopefully come forward. Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I would move that council proclaim March 26, 2024 as Purple Day in the town of Strathmore.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And that motion is carried. We move now to a motion to go back in camera for the last 4 items. Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I'd move that council go in camera at 7:40 p.m.
Thank you. All in favor? And we are going in camera.
Aye.